Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master on Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are here also paying our Dandavat Pranam to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of the Bhagavatam. And we are praying to Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī by the instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his recommendation. Yadi sevā-vañcitāḥ yasyāḥ kṛpayā vayaṃ labhema sarvaṃ prāpnumaḥ prayojanaṃ dhāmni śrī-bhagavat pade Kṛṣṇa-sambandhi sarvaṃ Yadi jānīmahe tutam Aṣṭādaśasu sahasreṣu ślokānāṃ bhāgavat-oktiṣu Rādhārānīṃ vindāmaḥ nishphalam bhagavata-yayinam radhikaya kripam vina vyartasyat sarva-pariśramaḥ. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy Dham and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Rādhārānīṃ within the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then our study of Srimad Bhagavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, all our efforts are in vain. So we are continuing our reading today from Canto 6, Chapter 1, Text 50. Panchabi kurute svartan, panchabedhata panchabi, ekastu sodashena trin, svayam sapta dasosnute. Above the five senses of perception, the five working senses, and the five objects of the senses is the mind, which is the 16th element. Above the mind is the 17th element, the soul, the living being himself, who in cooperation with the other 16 enjoys the material world alone. The living being enjoys three kinds of situations, namely happy, distressful, and mixed. Purport. Everyone engages in work with his hands, legs, and other senses just to achieve a certain goal according to his concocted ideas. One tries to enjoy the five sense objects, namely form, sound, taste, aroma, and touch, not knowing the actual goal of life, which is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Because of disobeying the Supreme Lord, one is put into material conditions, and he then tries to improve his situation in a concocted way, not desiring to follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nevertheless, the Supreme Lord is so kind that he comes himself to instruct the bewildered living entity how to act obediently and then gradually return home back to Godhead, where he can attain an eternal peaceful life of bliss and knowledge. The living entity has a body which is a very complicated combination of the material elements, and with this body he struggles alone, as indicated in this verse by the words ekastu. For example, if one is struggling in the ocean, he must swim through it alone. Although many other men and aquatics are swimming in the ocean, he must take care of himself because no one else will help him. Therefore, this verse indicates that the 17th item, the soul, must work alone. Although he tries to create society, friendship, and love, no one will be able to help him but Krishna, the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his only concern should be how to satisfy Krishna. That is also what Krishna wants. Sarva-dharmam parityaga mamekam sharanam vraja. Bhagavad Gita 18.66. People bewildered by material conditions try to be united, But although they strive for unity among men and nations, all their attempts are futile. Everyone must struggle alone for existence with the many elements of nature. Therefore, one's only hope, as Krishna advises, is to surrender to him, for he can help one become free from the ocean of nescience. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore prayed, Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavam buddho kṛpayā tava pada pankaja stita duli sadrusham vichintaya. O Krishna, beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant, but somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of nescience, and although I am struggling very hard, there is no way I can save myself. If you kindly pick me up and fix me as one of the particles of dust at your lotus feet, that will save me. In a similar way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, Anandi karma phale padi bhavarnava jale tari barena deki upaya. My dear Lord, I cannot remember when I somehow or other fell into this ocean of nescience, and now I can find no way to rescue myself. We should remember that everyone is responsible for his own life. If an individual becomes a pure devotee of Krishna, he is then delivered from the ocean of nescience. Text 51. Tad etat sodasakalam lingam shakti trayam mahat datenu sham shrutim pumsi harsha shoka bayartidam. The subtle body is endowed with 16 parts. The 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, the 5 objects of sense gratification, and the mind. This subtle body is an effect of the 3 modes of material nature. It is composed of insurmountably strong desires, and therefore it causes the living entity to transmigrate from one body to another in human life, animal life, and life as a demigod. When the living entity gets the body of a demigod, he is certainly very jubilant. When he gets a human body, he is always in lamentation. And when he gets the body of an animal, he is always afraid. In all conditions, however, he is actually miserable. His miserable condition is called samshriti, or transmigration in material life. Purport. The sum and substance of material conditional life is explained in this verse. The living entity, the 17th element, is struggling alone life after life. The struggle is called samshriti, or material conditional life. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the force of material nature is insurmountably strong. Daivi hyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Material nature harasses the living entity in different bodies, but if the living entity surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes free from this entanglement, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mamme vaye prapadyante mayam metam tarantite. Bhagavad Gita 7.14. Thus his life becomes successful. Text 52. Dehyagyo jita sadvargo nechan karmani karyate kosakara ivatmanam karmanachadaya karmanachadya muyati. The foolish embodied living entity, inept at controlling his senses and mind, is forced to act according to the influences of the modes of material nature, against his desires. He is like a silkworm that uses its own saliva to create a cocoon and then becomes trapped in it with no possibility of getting out. The living entity traps himself in a network of his own fruitive activities and then can find no way to release himself. Thus he is always bewildered and repeatedly he dies. Purport. As already explained, the influence of the modes of nature is very strong. The living entity entangled in different types of fruitive activity is like a silkworm trapped in a cocoon. Getting free is very difficult unless he is helped by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 53. Nahi kaschit chanhamapi jatu tishtatya karma krit karyate hyavasha karma gunai svabhavi karbalat. Not a single living entity can remain unengaged even for a moment. One must act by his natural tendency according to the three modes of material nature, because this natural tendency forcibly makes him work in a particular way. Purport. The svabhavika, or one's natural tendency, is the most important factor in action. One's natural tendency is to serve, because a living entity is an eternal servant of God. The living entity wants to serve, but because of his own forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord, he serves under the modes of material nature and manufactures various modes of service, such as socialism, humanitarianism, and altruism. However, one should be enlightened in the tenets of Bhagavad Gita and accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one give up all natural tendencies for material service under different names and take to the service of the Lord. One's original natural tendency is to act in Krishna consciousness because one's real nature is spiritual. The duty of a human being is to understand that since he is essentially spirit, he must abide by the spiritual tendency and not be carried away by material tendencies. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has therefore sung, Miche maya ravase yacha beshe kacha habudubu bhai. My dear brothers, you are being carried away by the waves of the material energy and are suffering in many miserable conditions. Sometimes you are drowning in the waves of material nature, and sometimes you are tossed like a swimmer struggling in the ocean. As confirmed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this tendency to be battered by the waves of Maya can be changed to one's original natural tendency, which is spiritual, when the living entity comes to understand that he is eternally Krishnadas, a servant of God, Krishna. Jiva Kṛṣṇa-dasa e vishvasa karle ta'ara dukhanai. If instead of serving Maya under different names, one turns his service attitude toward the Supreme Lord, he is then safe, and there is no more difficulty. If one returns to his original natural tendency in the human form of life by understanding the perfect knowledge given by Krishna himself in the Vedic literature, one's life is successful. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 54 on Monday. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Tirtha Maharaj Ki Jai. Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Navadut Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Sham Kund Radhakund Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.